I never thought I'd be forced to leave my own son's wedding. The phone call came at 6:23 a.m. on what should have been the happiest day of our family's life. We need to talk before the ceremony. Clarissa's voice was cold, distant. Nothing like the sweet girl who used to call me Mom just 6 months ago. Hold up, I'm curious where they're listening from. And if this story spoke to you, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, what I have planned for tomorrow is going to blow you away. My name is Ruth Clearwater, and for 28 years, I raised my son Daniel as a single mother in the small town of Millbrook Heights. His father walked out when Daniel was just 2 years old, leaving me to work double shifts at Henderson Manufacturing while putting myself through night school to become a certified financial planner. Every sacrifice I made was for Daniel. Every missed dinner with friends, every sleepless night studying, every penny saved instead of spent on myself. Daniel grew up understanding the value of hard work and family loyalty. When he graduated valedictorian from Millbrook High, I was there cheering louder than anyone. When he got his full scholarship to Whitmore University, I drove him there myself in my 15-year-old Honda, both of us crying happy tears. And when he landed his dream job as a software engineer at Meridian Tech, I felt like every sacrifice had been worth it. That's when he met Clarissa Penbrook. She was everything I wasn't: polished, privileged, from the wealthy Riverside district where houses had gates and gardeners. Her family owned Pembroke Estates, one of the largest real estate development companies in the tri-state area. The first time Daniel brought her home, she looked around our modest two-bedroom house like she was touring a museum exhibit on how the other half lived. But Daniel was smitten, and honestly, Clarissa could be charming when she wanted to be. She'd bring expensive wine to family dinners and compliment my cooking, though I noticed she barely touched the food. She'd ask about my work with genuine-seeming interest, though her eyes would glaze over when I actually explained financial planning for middle-class families. The engagement happened fast, too fast, I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. Daniel was 26, successful, and happy. Who was I to question his choices? When he asked for my grandmother's ring, a simple but elegant diamond solitaire that had been in our family for 3 generations, I gave it to him with my blessing, even though something in my gut told me to hold back. That's when things started to change. Suddenly, my weekly dinners with Daniel became monthly, then sporadic. Phone calls that used to happen daily became brief check-ins every few weeks. When I asked about wedding planning, I was told they had it handled through Clarissa's family's event coordinator. When I offered to help pay for something, anything, I was politely but firmly told it wasn't necessary. The guest list was the first real slap. I was allowed to invite 12 people to a wedding with over 200 guests. 12. My sister Janet, my brother Mike with his family, a few close friends from work, and that was it. Meanwhile, Clarissa's extended family, college friends, business associates, and social circle filled the rest of the seats. "It's just how these things work, Mom," Daniel explained when I questioned it. "The bride's family traditionally handles the guest lists, and venue capacity is limited." Limited. At the Riverside Country Club, one of the most exclusive venues in the state, with a ballroom that could easily hold 300 people? Then came the bridal shower I wasn't invited to, the bachelor party I wasn't told about until after, and the rehearsal dinner where I was seated at a table in the back with distant relatives, while Clarissa's college roommates sat at the head table. But the breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. I was cleaning out old files when I found the insurance policy I'd taken out on Daniel when he was young. The same policy I'd been faithfully paying premiums on for over 20 years, planning to transfer it to him as a wedding gift. When I called my insurance agent to arrange the transfer, he mentioned something odd. "That's interesting, Mrs. Clearwater. Someone already called about that policy last month, asking about beneficiaries and payout amounts. I assumed it was your son, but the voice sounded feminine. I didn't give out any information, of course, but I thought you should know." My hands went cold. Only 3 people knew about that policy: me, my lawyer Harold Brimmer, and Daniel, who had mentioned it to once years ago. but Daniel wouldn't need to call about his own policy information, and Harold would never discuss my business without permission. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I did what any concerned mother would do. I made some calls.
My friend Patty works at the courthouse, and after 20 years of friendship, she owed me a favor. A small background check revealed that Clarissa had been married before, something she'd conveniently forgotten to mention to Daniel. The marriage had lasted 8 months and ended in a messy divorce where she walked away with a substantial settlement from her much older husband's family business. Then I called my cousin Eddie, who works in real estate. Pembroke Estates wasn't doing as well as everyone thought. They were leveraged to the hilt, with several development projects stalled due to environmental issues and permit problems. The family was cash poor, despite their wealthy appearance. And finally, I remembered something that had been nagging at me for months. Clarissa always seemed to know things about our family that I'd never told her. Little details about my late mother's jewelry, about the small inheritance I'd received, about the life insurance policies I maintained. Things only someone who'd been very carefully listening and asking the right questions would know. The morning of the wedding, as I stood in my bedroom putting on the navy dress I'd bought for the occasion, the only dress Clarissa had approved from the 3 I'd shown her, I felt a knot of dread in my stomach that had nothing to do with typical mother-of-the-groom nerves. This wasn't just about social status or family dynamics. This was about something much more calculated, much more dangerous. And as I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting the pearl necklace my mother had left me, I realized that whatever was about to happen at this wedding, I needed to be ready for anything. Because sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who smile the sweetest. We poured our hearts into researching and telling this story. If you're hooked, show some love with a subscribe. Now, where were we? The phone call that morning was just the beginning. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting across from Clarissa in the hotel lobby of the Grand Meridian, where the bridal party was getting ready. She looked perfect, as always. Silk robe, professionally done makeup even before the real session, not a blonde hair out of place. But her eyes were ice cold. "Ruth," she said, not even bothering with pleasantries, "we need to discuss your behavior." My behavior? I set down my coffee cup carefully. "I'm not sure what you mean, Clarissa." The constant questions about the wedding plans, the way you've been inserting yourself into conversations with my family. My mother mentioned you were asking about our family business at the rehearsal dinner. Her voice was steady, controlled, but there was steel underneath. I had asked Clarissa's mother, Vivian Pembroke, about their developments, mostly just making polite conversation about the beautiful model homes I'd seen advertised. I was just being friendly. It came across as invasive, and frankly, Ruth, we've been talking as a family, and we think it would be better if you stepped back today. Stepped back? At my son's wedding? What exactly are you asking me to do? The ceremony is going to be intimate, close family only. Daniel agrees that having too many people might be overwhelming, and with your emotional tendencies, we think it's better if you watch from the hotel room. We'll have it live streamed. The words hit me like a physical blow. Emotional tendencies. I was one of the most level-headed people Daniel knew. I'd gotten him through his teenage years without a single dramatic blow-up. I'd calmly handled his college stress, his job search anxiety, his relationship problems before Clarissa. When had I ever been emotional at a family gathering? Never. Which meant this wasn't about protecting Daniel from my emotions. This was about protecting Clarissa from my presence. I sat on the hotel bed and pulled out my phone. First, I called my sister Janet,
who was supposed to be arriving with her husband in 2 hours. "Janet, it's me. Don't come to the ceremony." "What? Ruth, what happened?" "Clarissa just told me it's family only, and apparently I don't qualify." My voice was steadier than I felt. "That's insane! You're his mother!" "Yes, but I'm not a Pembroke." I looked out the hotel window at the country club across the street where white tents were being set up on the lawn. "Just trust me on this. Don't come." "Ruth, this is wrong. Daniel would never." "Daniel doesn't know." The words came out harder than I intended. "He thinks I agreed to this." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment. Then I called the second number on my list. "Harold, it's Ruth Clearwater. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it quietly." Harold Brimmer had been my lawyer for 15 years, ever since I'd needed help with Daniel's custody paperwork when his father briefly tried to come back into the picture. He was old school, discreet, and he owed me more than one favor. "What's going on, Ruth?" "I need you to pull everything you can on Clarissa Pembroke and her family. Corporate filings, property records, marriage licenses, divorce proceedings, everything." "Ruth, your son's wedding is today. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I watched through the window as a white limousine pulled up to the country club. White roses, crystal chandeliers being hung in the pavilion, a string quartet setting up near the altar. All funded by blood money, potentially. "There's more," Harold continued. "Pembroke Estates is 3 months away from bankruptcy. They've been using shell companies to hide debt, and Vivian Pembroke has been desperately looking for capital infusion. Your son's salary is decent, but it's not rescue the family business money." "But life insurance is." "Exactly. And Ruth, I pulled Daniel's policy information. Someone has been making inquiries about increasing the coverage amount. The requests came from an email account registered to C. Pembroke." My hands went cold. "How much?" $2.4 million. I stared out the hotel window at the wedding preparations continuing below. White roses, crystal chandeliers being hung in the pavilion, a string quartet setting up near the altar. All funded by blood money, potentially. "There's more," Harold continued. "Pembroke Estates is 3 months away from bankruptcy. They've been using shell companies to hide debt, and Vivian Pembroke has been desperately looking for capital infusion. Your son's salary is decent, but it's not rescue the family business money." "But life insurance is." "Exactly. And Ruth, I pulled Daniel's policy information. Someone has been making inquiries about increasing the coverage amount. The requests came from an email account registered to C. Pembroke." My hands went cold. My son was not only marrying a gold digger, he was marrying someone who might be planning to make him her second wealthy widower. "Harold, I need you to do 3 things immediately. First, contact the insurance company and put a freeze on any policy changes. Second, I need you to reach out to the Whitmore family's attorney. And third," I took a deep breath, "I need you to call Detective Raymond Costa." Ray Costa had been Daniel's Little League coach 15 years ago, but more importantly, he was now a detective with the county sheriff's department. He'd stayed in touch over the years, always asking about Daniel at community events. If anyone would take my concern seriously, it would be Ray. After hanging up with Harold, I did something I never thought I'd be doing. I opened my laptop and started hacking into information I had no business accessing. 25 years of financial planning had taught me that money leaves trails, and people who are desperate make mistakes. I started with public records, property transfers, business filings. Clarissa's name appeared on documents dating back 3 years, always as a consultant or advisor, never as an owner. She was careful, but not careful enough. Then I found it. A medical power of attorney document filed in Whitmore County, dated 2 weeks before Thomas Whitmore's death. Clarissa had legal authority to make medical decisions for her ex-husband, despite their divorce being finalized months earlier.
That wasn't standard. That was planning. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Dorothy Finch. She lived 2 houses down and had been keeping an eye on my place while I was at the hotel. "Ruth, strange car in your driveway this morning. 2 people went inside with keys. Thought you should know." Keys? To my house? That I'd never given to anyone except Daniel? I called Dorothy immediately. What did they look like? Young woman, blonde, very well dressed. Had a man with her, older, wearing a suit. They were inside for about 30 minutes. Clarissa and someone else had been in my house, going through my things. Looking for what? Insurance papers? Financial documents? Evidence of assets they hadn't accounted for? That's when I realized something that made me smile for the first time all day. Clarissa had made a fatal error in judgment. She thought she was dealing with a simple small-town mother who could be easily intimidated and discarded, but she didn't know about the other side of Ruth Clearwater. The side that had built a successful financial planning business from nothing. The side that had navigated complex divorce proceedings for dozens of clients, uncovering hidden assets and protecting victims of financial abuse. The side that had a network of contacts in banks, insurance companies, legal firms, and law enforcement across 3 counties. I opened my address book and started making calls. First, I called my client Sarah Morrison, whose husband had tried to hide assets during their divorce. Sarah now worked at First National Bank, where the Pembroke accounts were held. "Sarah, I need a favor, and I need you to be very careful about it." Next, I called James Wright, whose financial planning I'd handled after his wife's death. James was now an insurance investigator, and he owed me for helping him keep his house during his darkest period. "James, I need you to look into a claim from 3 years ago, Thomas Whitmore. I think there might have been fraud involved." Then I called my old college roommate, Nina Rodriguez, who's become a forensic accountant for the state attorney's office. "Nina, I'm sending you some documents. I need to know if these look legitimate or if someone's been creative with their bookkeeping." By 2 p.m., I had a network of people quietly investigating different aspects of Clarissa's background, her family's finances, and the suspicious circumstances surrounding her first husband's death. But I needed more than information. I needed insurance. I walked to my suitcase and pulled out something I'd brought as a sentimental gesture, my father's old tape recorder. He'd been a journalist before he died, and he'd taught me that sometimes the most important conversations needed to be preserved. I tested it. Still worked perfectly. Then I called the front desk. "This is Ruth Clearwater in room 507. I'd like to request a meeting with Clarissa Pembroke. Tell her it's about the family jewelry she was asking about." Family jewelry. The one thing I'd mentioned to Daniel months ago, my grandmother's pearl collection, worth about $15,000 that I'd planned to give to his wife as a wedding gift. I'd never told Clarissa directly, but Daniel might have mentioned it, and if my suspicions were right, she'd be very interested in cataloging every asset I owned. The front desk called back within 10 minutes. "Mrs. Pembroke will meet you in the garden room at 3 p.m. Perfect. The garden room was private, quiet, and had excellent acoustics for recording conversations. I spent the next hour preparing. I researched every public detail I could find about the Pembroke family finances, Thomas Whitmore's death, and Clarissa's timeline of relationships. I printed copies of everything Harold had sent me, and I practiced the conversation I was about to have, making sure I knew exactly which questions would reveal the most about Clarissa's true intentions. Because I realized something important. Clarissa hadn't just made an enemy by trying to exclude me from Daniel's wedding. She had made the mistake of threatening the wrong person. She thought she was dealing with a simple, small-town mother who could be easily intimidated and discarded. But she didn't know about the other side of Ruth Clearwater. The side that had built a successful financial planning business from nothing. The side that had navigated complex divorce proceedings for dozens of clients, uncovering hidden assets and protecting victims of financial abuse. At 2:45, I walked down to the garden room with my father's tape recorder in my purse, my phone fully charged, and a list of questions that would either confirm my worst fears or prove me wrong. Either way, I was about to find out exactly who Clarissa Pembroke really was, and she was about to find out that Ruth Clearwater
wasn't going anywhere.
Clarissa arrived at the garden room 15 minutes late, clearly expecting me to be grateful for any time she could spare. She looked radiant in her pre-wedding glow, wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. But there was something different in her eyes, a sharpness that hadn't been there this morning. "Ruth," she said, settling into the chair across from me with practiced grace. "I'm so glad we could have this chat before the ceremony. I wanted to make sure there were no hard feelings about this morning." I smiled warmly, the way I'd learned to do with difficult clients who thought they could manipulate me. "Of course not, dear. I completely understand wanting an intimate ceremony." I leaned forward conspiratorially. "Actually, I wanted to discuss something Daniel mentioned about the family jewelry tradition." Her eyes lit up immediately, confirming my suspicions. "Oh, yes, he mentioned your grandmother's pearls. They sound absolutely beautiful." "They are, but there's actually quite a bit more than Daniel realizes." I watched her face carefully as I spoke. "My family has been collecting pieces for generations. My great-grandmother's diamond brooch, my mother's emerald ring set, several vintage pieces that have appreciated considerably over the years." "How wonderful," Clarissa said, but I could see the calculation behind her smile. Family heirlooms are so precious. "The insurance appraisal last year put the collection at around $65,000, I said casually, watching her pupils dilate slightly. "Of course, that's just the monetary value. The sentimental value is priceless." "Of course," she leaned forward. "I hope you know how much I'd treasure being entrusted with such precious family pieces." There it was. Not, "if you'd like to share them someday," or "I'd be honored if you ever wanted to pass them down." She was already claiming ownership, already calculating their worth. "Well, that's actually what I wanted to discuss," I said, reaching into my purse. "There are some legal considerations with transferring valuable assets, especially with my financial planning background. I always advise clients to document these things properly." I pulled out a manila folder, not the one with Harold's research, but a decoy, filled with insurance appraisals and estate planning documents I'd prepared years ago. As I opened it, I watched Clarissa's eyes scan the pages hungrily. "This is so thoughtful of you." But she was entirely focused on the dollar amounts listed on the visible documents. I had no idea the collection was so substantial. "Oh, this isn't everything," I said offhandedly. "The life insurance policies, investment accounts, and property holdings are handled separately. Daniel mentioned you were interested in financial planning." "I've always been fascinated by wealth management, especially legacy planning and asset protection." Asset protection. The phrase made my skin crawl because I knew exactly what she meant. She wasn't interested in protecting assets for Daniel's benefit. She was interested in protecting them for her own. "It's a complex field," I agreed, "especially when it comes to understanding the tax implications of inheritance versus life insurance payouts." I paused deliberately. "I imagine you learned quite a bit about that during your previous marriage." For just a split second, her composure cracked. Her smile faltered, and something cold and calculating flashed across her face before she recovered. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said carefully. "Oh, I just meant that being married before probably taught you about joint assets, beneficiary designations, that sort of thing. It can be quite overwhelming the first time you deal with it." "Yes," she said slowly. "Thomas was very thorough about financial planning." Thomas. She'd used his name without me mentioning it. A normal person would have said, "my ex-husband," or "my first husband," but she'd used his name like it was still familiar, still relevant. "I'm sure he was," I said sympathetically. "It must have been difficult handling all those details after his passing. Even though you were divorced, I imagine there were still loose ends to tie up." This time, her mask slipped entirely. Her eyes went wide, and I saw a flash of panic before she composed herself. "I'm not sure how you know about that," she said, her voice much cooler now. Small world, I said with a shrug. The financial planning community isn't very large. We hear things. I closed the folder and leaned back. But enough about the past. Let's focus on the future. On Daniel's future. The way I emphasized Daniel's future made it clear I wasn't just talking about wedding gifts anymore. We were talking about his survival. Clarissa stood up abruptly. I think I should get back to the bridal suite. The ceremony is in 2 hours and I still have so much to do. Of course, I said pleasantly. Oh, but Clarissa, one more thing. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about me being emotional. You're absolutely right. I can be very protective when it comes to my family. Just ask anyone who's ever tried to hurt someone I love. They'll tell you exactly how emotional I can get. She left without another word, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the quick, agitated clicks of her heels on the marble floor.
My phone buzzed immediately. A text from Harold. Costa is on his way to the hotel. Sarah confirmed unusual activity on Pembroke accounts, large cash withdrawals over past month. James found irregularities in Whitmore's insurance claim. Nina says their books are cooked 6 ways from Sunday. Then, another text from Ray Costa himself. Ruth, just reviewed the Whitmore file. You were right to call. Can you meet me in 20 minutes? But the most important message came from Dorothy, my neighbor. They came back to your house. Same woman, different man this time. Looked like they were taking photos of everything. I smiled grimly. Clarissa was panicking, making desperate moves, trying to catalog all of my assets before the wedding. She was accelerating her timeline, which meant I'd been right about her intentions. She wasn't planning to wait long after the marriage to make Daniel her second widowed husband. My phone rang. Daniel. Mom, I just talked to Clarissa. She seemed upset about something. She said you two had a conversation about jewelry? We did, sweetheart. I was telling her about Grandma's pearls. She's worried that you're having second thoughts about this morning's arrangement. Arrangement. Even Daniel was using Clarissa's language now, treating my exclusion from his wedding like a mutual business decision. Daniel, can I ask you something? Sure, Mom. When did I become someone you needed to protect people from? There was a long pause. What do you mean? When did I become the kind of person who would cause problems at your wedding? When did I become someone whose emotions couldn't be trusted? Mom, you're not... Because I've been thinking about it, and I can't remember a single time in your life when I've been anything but supportive. Even when you dated that girl in college who stole your credit card. Even when you wanted to drop out of engineering school to become a musician. Even when you brought Clarissa home and she looked at our house like it was contaminated. Mom, please don't do this today. I'm not doing anything, Daniel. I'm just wondering when you decided I was the problem. I hung up before he could answer because I needed him to think about that question. Really think about it. 20 minutes later, I met Ray Costa in the hotel parking lot. He was in plain clothes, but I could see the bulge of his service weapon under his jacket. Ruth, I've got to tell you, this is one hell of a wedding day conversation, he said, but his expression was grim. The Whitmore case has been bothering me for 3 years. Heart attack in a healthy 32-year-old, no family history, perfect blood work just weeks before he died. What stopped you from investigating further? Politics. The Pembroke family has connections, and without hard evidence, the department wasn't interested in pursuing it. He handed me a folder. Take a look at page 12. I flipped to page 12 and found a photograph of Thomas Whitmore's medicine cabinet taken during the initial investigation. Among the usual items was a bottle of prescription medication I recognized from my financial planning work with elderly clients. Digitalis, I said quietly. Heart medication, Ray nodded. But Thomas Whitmore didn't have a heart condition. And here's the interesting part. That prescription was filled by Clarissa Pembroke 2 days before his death using a forged prescription pad from her family doctor. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Clarissa hadn't just married Thomas for his money, she had killed him for it. And now she was planning to do the same thing to Daniel. Ray, the wedding is in 90 minutes. I know, and Ruth, I need you to understand something. I believe you. I believe she's dangerous, but I can't arrest her for murder based on circumstantial evidence from 3 years ago. He looked toward the country club where the ceremony would soon begin. But I can make sure that if anything happens to your son, we're ready.
As I walked back toward the hotel, I realized that everything had changed. This wasn't about wedding planning or family dynamics anymore. This wasn't about respect or inclusion. This was about saving my son's life. And Clarissa Pembroke was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong mother to cross. I had exactly 73 minutes to save my son's life. The wedding guests were already arriving, elegant cars pulling into the circular drive of the Riverside Country Club. Through my hotel window, I could see Clarissa's family mingling on the terrace, all smiles and champagne glasses, completely unaware that they were about to witness either a wedding or an intervention that would destroy their carefully constructed world. My phone buzzed with updates from my network. Nina had found evidence of embezzlement from the Pembroke accounts. James had gotten Thomas Whitmore's original autopsy report, which showed traces of plant-based cardiac glycosides that the original examiner had dismissed as dietary supplements. Harold had managed to freeze Daniel's life insurance policy changes, but Clarissa had already increased his coverage to $1.8 million 3 weeks ago. Everything was in place, except for one crucial element. I needed Daniel to see the truth with his own eyes. I walked down to the hotel lobby and made a call to the country club's event coordinator, a woman named Patricia, whom I'd met during the rehearsal dinner.
Patricia, this is Ruth Clearwater, Daniel's mother. I need to speak with you urgently about the ceremony setup. Of course, Mrs. Clearwater. Is everything all right? There's been a family emergency, and I need to make sure Daniel receives a message before the ceremony begins. Can you arrange for him to meet me in the rose garden behind the chapel? Tell him it's about his father. His father, the one subject guaranteed to get Daniel's immediate attention, the one person he'd always wondered about and never found. 20 minutes later, Daniel appeared in the rose garden, looking handsome in his black tuxedo, but concerned. "Mom, what's going on? Patricia said something about Dad?" I handed him the folder containing everything Harold and my network had discovered. "Daniel, I need you to look at these documents before you walk down that aisle." "Mom, the ceremony starts in 45 minutes. Can't this wait?" "No, it can't." My voice was steady, but firm. "Because in 45 minutes, you're going to marry someone who murdered her first husband, and you're going to be next." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "What are you talking about?" "Thomas Whitmore, heart attack at 32 with no medical history, digitalis poisoning from forged prescriptions, a $2.4 million insurance payout that saved Clarissa's family from bankruptcy." I pointed to the first document. "It's all here." He flipped through the pages, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief to horror. "This can't be real. Your life insurance was increased to $1.8 million 3 weeks ago. You didn't sign those papers, Daniel. She forged your signature, just like she forged Thomas's prescription." "No," he shook his head. "Mom, I know you don't like Clarissa, but this is—" "Daniel." I grabbed his hands. "She banned me from your wedding this morning. She told me I was too emotional, too unstable to attend my own son's ceremony. Does that sound like something I would agree to?" He went very still. "She said you were having anxiety about the crowd size." "I've never had anxiety about crowds in my life. I've spoken at financial conferences with 500 people. I raised you as a single mother while building a business from nothing. When have I ever been too fragile to handle a family event?" For the first time, I saw doubt creep into his eyes. "I searched my house twice this week. She's been cataloging my assets, your assets, planning exactly how much she'll inherit when you're gone. Mom, even if this is true, even if Thomas's death was suspicious, that doesn't mean—" "Daniel, look at page 8. He turned to the photograph Ray Costa had given me, Clarissa's medicine cabinet from her current apartment, taken by a private investigator Harold had hired that afternoon. There, among her vitamins and cosmetics, was a bottle of digitalis tablets. "She doesn't have a heart condition," I said quietly. "I checked with her doctor's office. She's never been prescribed cardiac medication." Daniel's face went white. "Oh my God, there's more." I showed him the bank records Nina had uncovered. The Pembroke family is 3 months from bankruptcy. They need capital immediately, and your life insurance payout would solve all of their problems. He was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. But she loves me. She said yes when I proposed. She's been planning this wedding for months. She's been planning your death for months, I corrected. The wedding is just the legal formality that makes her your widow. That's when we heard footsteps on the garden path. Clarissa appeared around the corner, radiant in her wedding dress, followed by her father, Marcus Pembroke, and 2 men I didn't recognize. "Daniel, darling, what are you doing out here?" Her voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were ice-cold as they fixed on the documents in his hands. "The ceremony starts in 30 minutes. "Clarissa," Daniel's voice was strange, hollow, "we need to talk." "Of course we do." She smiled, but I noticed her hand signal to the 2 men behind her. "Ruth, I think it's time for you to leave." "I'm not going anywhere." That's when Marcus Pembroke stepped forward. "Mrs. Clearwater, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown. My daughter has tried to be patient with you, but this has gone too far." "Has it?" I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Then you won't mind explaining why your family has been withdrawing large amounts of cash over the past month? Or why your daughter has digitalis in her medicine cabinet? Or why she increased Daniel's life insurance without his knowledge?" "You're delusional," Clarissa snapped, but I could see panic behind her eyes. "Daniel," I said, never taking my eyes off Clarissa, "ask her about Thomas Whitmore." "I don't know what she's told you, but Thomas died of a heart attack. It was tragic, but—" "Ask her about the forged prescription," I interrupted. Daniel looked at his bride, the woman he'd been about to promise his life to. "Clarissa, did you forge a prescription for heart medication before Thomas died?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Clarissa's mask finally slipped completely. "You stupid interfering bitch! Do you have any idea what you've destroyed?" "Daniel's answered my question," I said calmly.
But Clarissa wasn't finished. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing detective, digging up ancient history. But you have no idea what it's like to watch everything you've worked for slip away because of other people's weaknesses." "Other people's weaknesses?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "Thomas was weak, depressed, pathetic. He was going to drink himself to death anyway. I just expedited the process." She turned to Daniel, her voice becoming pleading. "But you're different, Danny. You're strong, successful. We could have been happy for years before you killed me, too," Daniel finished. That's when Detective Ray Costa stepped out from behind the chapel wall where he'd been recording everything. "Clarissa Pembroke, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Whitmore and conspiracy to commit murder." The next few minutes were chaos. Marcus Pembroke shouting about lawyers and false accusations, the 2 men with them trying to quietly disappear, wedding guests gathering to see what the commotion was about. But through it all, I watched my son's face as he realized how close he'd come to marrying his own killer. "Mum," he said as the police led Clarissa away in handcuffs, her wedding dress trailing in the dirt. "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." "You don't need to apologize," I said, pulling him into a hug. "You just need to be more careful about who you trust." "How did you know?" "Because I'm your mother," I said simply. "And I've spent 28 years learning to spot people who want to take advantage of the people I love." 2 hours later, we were sitting in the hotel restaurant, Daniel, myself, Janet and her family, Ray Costa, and Harold Brimmer. The wedding guests had all gone home, the country club was cleaning up the unused decorations, and Daniel was still wearing his tuxedo but had loosened his tie. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now you live," I said. "You find someone who loves you for who you are, not what you're worth. You learn to trust your instincts, and you never, ever dismiss your mother's concerns as emotional again." He laughed for the first time all day. "Deal." Ray leaned forward. "With Clarissa's confession and all the evidence Ruth gathered, we'll be reopening the Whitmore case. She's looking at murder 1, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and about a dozen other charges."
What about her family? The Pembroke estate will be seized as part of the investigation. Turns out they've been running a con for years, using marriages and deaths to fund their lifestyle. I can't believe I almost— But you didn't, I interrupted, because sometimes even when people try to push us away, love finds a way to protect what matters most. 3 months later, Daniel moved back to Millbrook Heights. He took a job with a local tech company, bought a small house 6 blocks from mine, and started coming over for dinner every Sunday like he used to. He's dating a teacher now, a sweet woman named Rebecca who brings me flowers and actually eats my cooking. When she laughs at his jokes, I can see that she means it. When she talks about the future, it includes both of us. Last week, Daniel brought me something, a small velvet box. "I thought you might want this back," he said, opening it to reveal my grandmother's ring. "Keep it," I said, "for when you're ready to give it to the right person." "How will I know she's the right person?" I smiled. "She'll be the one who makes you want to call your mother more often, not less. She'll be the one who sees your family as a gift, not an obstacle. And she'll be the one who would never, ever try to keep the people who love you away from the most important moments of your life." He nodded, understanding finally what love was supposed to look like. Sometimes, the most important thing a mother can do is refuse to disappear, even when everyone else thinks she should. Sometimes love means standing your ground, asking hard questions, and fighting for the people that matter most. And sometimes, when someone tries to erase you from your child's life, the best response is to remind them exactly who they're dealing with.
2 more compelling stories are just a click away. If this one drew you in, wait until you see what else we found. Ready to explore?